9 spine-chilling sleepover stories exposed. Discover the sinister truths behind haunted nights. Emily's heart raced as she stood before the crumbling facade of the old Wilkins house. It loomed over her like a sinister giant, cloaked in ivy and whispers of the past. A chilling breeze shuddered through the air, sending a frigid wave of dread curling around her spine. "Come on, Em! What are you scared of?" taunted Jake, his grin stretching wide, the bravado of her friends pushing her into the abyss of uncertainty. The house didn't just hold a fearsome reputation. It was the resting place of lost souls rumored to have devoured a family years ago without a trace. As dusk descended, the world outside was swathed in a peculiar twilight, casting disturbing shadows that danced unnaturally. The gang sprinted inside, desperate to shake off the creeping fear. "Get cozy!" Sarah yelled, tossing pillows and blankets, her laughter echoing against the dilapidated walls. Emily felt the knot of anxiety tighten. Did they truly understand the malevolence that lurked here? She shoved away the thoughts and joined them, convincing herself that it was all in good fun. They gathered in a circle, popcorn at the ready, as each friend shared their spookiest stories. "The old farm at the end of the road?" Jake laughed. "They say those kids who disappeared years back still roam the fields. You can hear their laughter at night." With each tale, the room teetered on the edge of laughter and terror. But Emily felt it too, a distant echo of whispers wrapped around her, unsettling and wrong. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A mix of giggles and gasps erupted. "It's just the old wiring," Chris quipped, but Emily wasn't so sure. She squinted through the darkness, feeling the house's chilling presence deepen as the stories turned darker. A school said to be haunted by innocent laughter turned morbid screams. With every howl of the wind, she envisioned ghostly figures creeping closer, feeding off their bravado. Before long, the mood shifted, the tension throbbed in the air, thick and suffocating. Emily's laughter faded as she accidentally dislodged a rug, revealing a wooden trapdoor hidden beneath. The moment felt surreal. It was as if it were beckoning them. "Let us see what's down there," she urged, an unsettling mixture of curiosity and fear bubbling within. "Are you crazy?" Sarah shot back, her voice shaking, hesitation clawing at the bravado they'd just built. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The lights went out entirely, plunging them into a suffocating void. Panic flooded Emily's senses. Their laughter turned into frantic breaths. With the shadows thick around them, footsteps echoed strange and deliberate among the creaking wood. Whispers filled the air, bouncing off the walls. Her friends' faces morphed under the shadow of the night, twisting into something far less familiar. "What was that?" Chris hissed, eyes wide with terror. Panic set in as the darkness clung to them. The urge to flee clawed at Emily while a chilling clarity settled into her bones. They were not alone. Those trapped within the house were awakening, their lurking specters rising to meet the curious intruders. What had they stirred? What waited beyond the trapdoor, and who would escape? A spine-chilling stillness gripped the room. Emily felt the press of darkness like a weight on her chest. The air tasted stale, faintly tinged with mold, but there was something else, something sweet and acrid that twisted her stomach. "Guys, we need to get out of here," she whispered, conviction fighting against the terror edging its way up her throat. But as she turned, Jake grabbed her arm, his grip tightening like a vice. "Just stay put. It's probably just a blown fuse or something." But his voice wavered, betraying his own courage. The clattering from the corners of the room grew louder, and a thudding sound began to beat rhythmically like an ominous drum. Suddenly, one of the pillow forts fell over, blankets sliding off the couch. A cold draft swept through the room, sending chills racing down Emily's spine. She darted her eyes around, desperately searching for some light, some clarity. Shadows flickered, merging and separating as if they were alive, writhing in the corners like snakes waiting to strike. Is anyone there? Chris's voice trembled, echoing louder than intended. Silence swallowed his words, stretching into an uncomfortable void. Then came the whispers, soft, almost imperative, like secrets that wanted nothing more than to drag the living down with them. The trapdoor taunted them, its edges illuminated by a sliver of moonlight that had found its way through a cracked window. "Let us see what's down there," Emily urged again, but her voice cracked, fighting off panic. "This is a joke, right? You want us to go down there?" Sarah quipped, but her expression betrayed her mask of bravery. The whispers grew increasingly frantic, calling for attention. Jake broke away from Emily, moving towards the trapdoor. "We have to look. Whatever is down there could explain." Before he could finish, the ground trembled. The house groaned as if awakening from a long nightmare. The whispering intensified, an angry cacophony, piercing through the air. "Stop!" Emily screamed. She was terrified of the dark but more afraid of what waited on the other side of that door. Jake knelt and pulled the handle. The trapdoor creaked, protesting as it opened slowly. An inky blackness gaped beneath him, pooling like a Stygian abyss. He leaned forward, eyes widening, drawn even closer by the sound of rustling movement just out of sight. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on, drowning the room in harsh brightness. The sudden illumination burned like fire in her eyes, forcing Emily to shield her face. She blinked, disoriented. When she looked again, Jake was gone. "Jake!" Sarah screamed, her voice high and shrill. Emily stumbled back, heart pounding, each beat echoing in her ears. Chris spun around, his face pale, disbelief flooding through him. "Guys, he was right here!" Chris's voice trembled, looking around frantically. But their friend had vanished. Mounting dread crushed Emily's chest. Could the house have swallowed him whole? Where could he have vanished to so quickly? "It wasn't a joke, it can't be," she gasped. The whispers rose again, echoing with bitterness and anger. The floor beneath them seemed to pulse, a heartbeat of the house itself. In the distance, a sinister laughter joined the whispers, digging into their bones. The house was feeding on their fear, and they were just beginning to realize the price they might pay for having come here. "Should we call out?" Sarah trembled, eyes wide with panic. "Are we really going to stay here and do nothing?" Emily shot back, fists clenching at her sides. "No! We'll go look for him!" Chris shouted, determination cutting through the panic. "We can't leave him!" But the house shifted around them, close and confining. The darkness felt like a living thing, twisting around their legs, boiling dread flooding through the cracks. They had to decide quickly, or they would join Jake where the shadows ruled. "Which way?" Emily gasped, her voice barely a whisper as her eyes danced over the creeping darkness. "Down, down!" Chris urged, reaching to pull Sarah towards the opening, heart racing. But their hesitation brought forth a rumble beneath them, an echo of warning that coiled in the air the further they went in, the more they risked waking whatever cursed presence still lay dormant. What would they find beneath? Would there be a way back? They stepped closer to the void, the once unimposing trapdoor beginning to feel like the entry to hell itself. Emily's heart raced as she peered into the trapdoor's gaping maw, darkness unfurling like a living creature. Anxiety clawed at her throat. "We shouldn't," she breathed, the words barely escaping. Chris ignored her, his pulse quickening. He took a deep breath, wanting to display bravery. "We have to find him," he insisted, grabbing the flashlight that lay on the ground, a frail beacon against the inky dark below. He shone it into the darkness, the light dissipating the shadows, but only briefly. The faint beams flickered and bounced back at them, revealing nothing but an unsettling void. Sarah's eyes darted back and forth between Emily and Chris. "This is a bad idea. We don't even know what we're getting into." Her voice trembled, quaking in fear, but her protests were drowned out by the whispers rising in a dissonant swell, crashing around them like waves. "Listen," Emily snapped, her uncertainty morphing into frustration. "Jake wouldn't he just disappear? We have to go down and find him." With a nod, Chris steeled himself and began his descent. Emily and Sarah exchanged a desperate glance before following. One by one, they climbed down the rickety ladder, the wood creaking menacingly under their weight. As soon as Chris reached the bottom, the air shifted. It was cooler here, damp and heavy, as if the walls were closing in. The flashlight flickered, illuminating a cramped room that felt like a tomb. Old wooden beams crisscrossed above them, and dirt enveloped the floor like a shroud. "Jake!" Chris called, his voice echoing into the dark. "Where are you?" No response came, only the whispers that sounded louder now, sharp and insistent, as if they were pleading for something, or someone. Emily surveyed the room, squinting into the corners where shadows pooled. Something glimmered faintly near the far wall, a silver object half buried in dust. Tentatively, she approached it, heart hammering in her chest. As she crouched to get a better look, the whispers grew frantic, clawing at her mind. "Don't touch it!" Sarah gasped, rushing forward. "It could be a trap!" But Emily was already reaching for the object. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal, and she pulled it into the light, a locket, tarnished with age, its surface engraved with ornate designs. Just as she opened it, a shrill scream echoed through the air, crystal clear, unmistakably Jake's voice, full of terror. "Jake!" Emily screamed, her voice breaking as she dropped the locket. The whispers transformed into sinister laughter, swirling around them, taunting their panic. Chris's flashlight flickered again, and just for a heartbeat, the oppressive darkness seemed to set itself in motion, gathering and twisting like a storm brewing. With a jolt of adrenaline, Chris turned to the others, eyes wide. This was a mistake. "We need to go back." But before they could climb up, the ground shook violently, and the walls echoed with a low growl. "What is happening?" Sarah shouted, but her words were swallowed by the roar of the house as it awakened and raged. The shadows slithered closer, forming tendrils that caressed their ankles, urging them to lose themselves within the abyss. Up above, the trapdoor slammed shut, sealing them in. "No!" Emily screamed, panic washing over her like a wave. "We're trapped." As the last flickering ray of flashlight illuminated their faces, Emily felt the locket burn in her palm. Images swirled in her mind, flashes of Jake in pain, shadows crawling closer, and a revelation creeping in. Had Jake been sacrificed to whatever was beneath? And then a sinister voice beckoned from the depths, whispering her name. Emily. The darkness surrounded them, waiting to consume their fear. What awaited them in this living grave? Would the whispers tell her more than she wanted to know? The world above dimmed like a candle snuffed out, and despair crept into every corner of the packed earthen chamber. Emily's breath hesitant, felt trapped like a mouse in a maze, the locket in her hand hot and pulsing as if it carried Jake's heartbeat. Chris, wide-eyed and trembling, clutched the flashlight even tighter. "We need to move!" he shouted, but the darkness draped over them like a wet blanket, smothering the already fragile courage they clung to. "Where?" Sarah croaked, her voice breaking, panic lifting her words. The whispers seemed to surge, latching onto her fear, twisting it into something tangible, something real that they could feel scratching just beneath their skin. The shadows flickered, tugging at their resolve, pulling them deeper into despair. As they stumbled backward, Emily felt an almost magnetic pull toward the locket. "It's not just a locket," she whispered, not sure of who she was trying to convince. "Jake's in there." "No, no! It can't be!" Chris spat, backing away from her. But the urge to look again consumed her. "Jake might need us." She squeezed the locket tighter, its cold weight grounding her against the rising panic. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices swirling around them, but somehow she could almost discern one repeated echo amid the chaos. "Find me, save me." With shaky fingers, Emily pried the locket open once more, and flickering images danced before her eyes. Jake's once vibrant face turned pale, twisted by raw terror, and a glimpse of something dark and monstrous loomed behind him. A shadow with malicious intent. Sarah yanked on Emily's arm, pulling her back. "Don't! You're only making it worse." But the images snaked their way into Emily's mind, inked memories intertwined with horror. The locket throbbed as if urging her to dig deeper, beckoning forth every fear she possessed. What are you hiding? She choked, as despair and denial mingled, creating a toxic storm. We have to escape. Chris snapped again. The walls of the cramped chamber began to shift, their surfaces writhing with shadows that pulsated to the beat of Emily's racing heart. Just then, an ear-piercing screech sliced through the air, reverberating against the walls, rattling their very bones. What the hell was that? Sarah screamed, eyes darting wildly, searching for an escape. A burst of wind whipped through the room, tossing dust into the air. Chris swung the flashlight around frantically, its beam shaking, revealing glimpses of twisted faces embedded in the walls, mouths gaping open in silent screams. Emily felt bile rise in her throat as she fought against the whirling terror around them. They turned to the passageway at the far end, reluctant but compelled by an instinct to flee. We can't stay here, Chris urged, stepping toward the undiscovered escape. As they scrambled forward, the ground trembled again. The darkness pulsated, alive and hungry, tearing at the edges of their sanity. Where does it lead? Sarah whimpered, but Emily's focus narrowed, locking onto a fleeting outline. It looked like a distorted figure, cloaked and shifting. As they neared the passage, Emily felt the locket heat fiercely once again. The whispers morphed into screams, shards of her own fear crystallizing as she realized the locket had been a tether, a connection to whatever malevolence festered in this darkened realm. Beyond the passage, something awaited them, a horrifying unknown. Could it be the very thing that stole Jake from them? Emily! The whisper called again, more insistent now, more desperate. Help me! Steeling herself, she bolted ahead, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The others followed, driven by fear and urgency as the chamber gave itself, and the walls seemed determined to swallow them whole. But what lay beyond the threshold of that claustrophobic space? What malevolent force awaited them just within grasp? The cries of the trapped echoed through the dark, intensifying the nightmare. Would they find Jake, or would they discover something far worse lurking in the shadows? They dashed into the passage, hearts racing, the screams still clawing at their ears. The air thickened, choking them with dread as they plunged headlong into the unknown. The narrow corridor twisted and turned in a grotesque mockery of safety. Each step echoed ominously, amplifying their fears as shadows seemed to reach for them with malicious intent. Which way? Chris shouted over the growing cacophony, his voice trembling. Emily felt the locket pulsing against her chest, the unspeakable weight of its secrets threatening to crush her. Just keep moving, she gasped, the sound of her own voice barely audible against the screams echoing in her head. The corridor felt alive, each heartbeat resonating in the walls, a sinister rhythm that aligned with her mounting panic. They stumbled forward together, confusion clouding their judgment. They wanted to find Jake, but what if he was no longer who he once was? What kind of darkness could transform him into something monstrous? Light flickered at the end of the passage. Emily squinted, heart hammering in her chest, mixing hope and dread. There! She was taking a leap off the edge, but what awaited them on the other side could be worse than the darkness they fled. As they approached the light, the whispers shifted into coherent words, chilling and sweet. Come closer. Don't be afraid. It wrapped around them like silk, enticing but deadly. Stop! Sarah yelled, frozen in place as an unseen force seemed to lull her into a trance. I don't think we should go in. Emily felt the locket pulsing fiercely, its heat a stark contrast to the icy fear gripping her gut. It wants us to, she urged, trying to reach her friend through the fog. But her voice was swallowed by that enticing call. Something was beckoning them to cross into the light. Come on, Sarah! Chris shouted, gripping her wrist. We can't give up! But unease coiled tightly around them, the light flickering in response to their fear. Suddenly, shadows coalesced into a sinister figure, huge and looming, blocking the exit as its form twisted and churned. You have what I desire, it hissed, a voice dripping with malice. Chris gasped and stumbled back, eyes wide. What does that mean? The creature unleashed a guttural laugh, shaking the walls, causing bits of stone to rain down around them. Emily felt the locket, its warmth now scorching against her palm. It was Jake's voice calling from within, fragmented yet clear, Emily save me. The sorrow mixed with raw terror drove her ever forward. Without thinking, she stepped closer to the light. I can help you, Jake, she cried, pushing through the fear coiling around her like a serpent. But the closer she got, the more the creature shifted, its features distorting with rage. Foolish girl. No one escapes, it bellowed, lunging towards her. Emily's heart pounded, the edges of her vision blurring. In a moment of instinct, she thrust the locket forward, a desperate plea. I will save him. The figure recoiled, the light dimming abruptly. The screaming intensified, joined by the tortured echoes of another voice. Jake's laughter, warped and breaking, mingled with cries of agony. The shadows recoiled as the light fractured, revealing glimpses of a harrowing landscape beyond. The walls trembled, the air electric with energy, and in that split second, Emily understood the locket was a conduit, a bridge between worlds. But to cross over, someone might have to stay behind. Emily! Sarah screamed again, grasping her arm. We can't just leave without knowing. What if it's true? Chris added, his voice shaking. What if we can't go back? Just outside the doorway lay an abyss of swirling darkness, and every second felt like a countdown to a fate worse than death. I want to let him go, Emily shouted amid the chaos. But what was she truly risking, and could they all survive the choice they hadn't meant to make? As the figure lunged again, the locket glimmered fiercely this time. The choice was no longer just hers. Everything hung in the balance, and they faced the edge of an enigma that could change them forever, or drive them into the depths of terror from which there might be no return. Was it salvation waiting on the other side, or the final nail in their coffin? The figure lunged again, its shadow stretching longer in the dim light, enveloping them in a dark shroud. Emily's heart thundered in her chest. The hallway vibrated with a pulse, as if it fed off their fear. She could almost taste the panic in the air, a metallic flavor that sent shivers through her veins. Emily! Chris's voice cracked with urgency as he pulled Sarah away from the threshold. We have to move now. But she couldn't tear her gaze from the locket, its light flickering like a candle in a storm. It whispered secrets, and though terror gripped her, she felt a flicker of determination ignite deep within. She had to save Jake. She had to figure it out. Then, a scream split the air, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Emily staggered back, realizing it was not an ordinary scream, but a cacophony of voices intertwined in agony. Each cry clawed at her consciousness, trying to drag her down into their depths. She fought against it, focusing on the locket, the warmth wrapping around her hand like a life raft. Step back! Chris shouted, punching the air, warding off the advancing darkness. But each swing only seemed to anger the creature, its eyes narrowing like slits, glinting with hunger. What does it want from us? I think it wants the locket, Emily replied, voice quaking. Maybe it's tied to Jake somehow. Then let us destroy it. Sarah gasped, her breath ghosting in the chill that seeped from the walls. It's too dangerous. No. Emily felt the words rip from her throat. I can't. But the notion of destruction pounded relentlessly in her brain. If the locket was the key, then could it truly be their only hope? The figure roared, a horrific sound that echoed through the corridor. Its limbs twisted and elongated, as if it were trying to break free from the very fabric of reality. Your time is short, it spat, advancing relentlessly. Surrender what I seek. Each step it took sent tremors through the ground, causing dust and debris to rain down upon them in a lethal shower. Emily's vision blurred as adrenaline coursed through her veins. She thought of Jake trapped alone. No! I want to be used like this, she cried, feeling suddenly empowered. We can find a way. Find a way? Chris hissed through clenched teeth. Are you insane? We need to go. Now. But it was too late. The shadows surged forward, closing in, pulling them toward the abyss. Emily felt the locket hum violently, the energy building to a crescendo that resonated within her. A thought ignited: if the locket was a key, then it could unlock something, perhaps even a way out. We have to harness it. We can channel its energy. she yelled, her voice raw with conviction. Suddenly, as if in response, the shadows somersaulted back, momentarily dissolved by the locket's luminescence. The creature screeched, its form distortion reflecting its rage. You dare defy me? Let us try it. Emily shouted over the din, holding the locket high. It pulsed wildly now, the light growing brighter, pushing back the darkness. With every beat, the air thickened, the weight of the choice before them crashing down like a wave. We can do it together! She grabbed Sarah's hand, then Chris's, forming a chain of desperation and defiance. Just then, the ground beneath them shifted, as if the very structure were alive and responding to their resolve. Hold on! Emily shouted, feeling the locket vibrate fiercely. The shadows roared, encircling them, and for an instant she glimpsed Jake, his face twisted in horror, contorted between fear and pleading. Then, the world dissolved around them, and a jarring silence swallowed their screams. Where were they now? Reality felt fragile, the colors wrong, and a bone-chilling whisper slithered through the air. You've crossed my threshold. They stood suspended in a void, the locket dimming in Emily's grasp, flickering ominously, as if it too were afraid of what loomed beyond the edges of this new realm. Would they find Jake here or unleash something far worse than the darkness they fled? The air thickened with anticipation, and dread settled in, knowing that the true nightmare was just beginning. The void stretched endlessly around them, an oppressive silence settling like a weight in their chests. Emily felt the locket flicker weakly, as if it was losing its glow, losing its power. She squeezed it tightly, a desperate reminder of their mission. Jake was somewhere in this nightmare, lost and vulnerable. Where are we? Chris's voice barely rose above a whisper, his eyes darting around, searching for some source of comfort in the inky darkness. I don't know, Emily stammered, her heart racing. The invisible walls pressed in on her, and an unsettling cold seeped into her bones. The oppressive darkness felt malevolent, whispering secrets in an unrecognizable language. We need to stay together. Sarah's hands trembled as she glanced toward the emptiness. What if the creature follows us? What if it can reach us here? A chill sliced through Emily. She didn't want to think about that. We can't fall apart now. We have to find Jake. He needs us. A low groan echoed throughout the void, drawing their attention like a moth to a flame. It rumbled, deep and resonant, vibrating through their very core. The shadows around them shifted slightly, a fleeting suggestion of movement. Did you hear that? Chris said, pressing closer, trying to peer into the blackness. There was something raw and hungry in that sound, something that made their skin crawl. What do we do? Sarah asked, voice shaking. Maybe the locket can help us. Emily raised it, feeling it thrum against her palm. She felt a tugging sensation, as if it wanted to lead her somewhere. The shadows shifted again, and Emily stepped forward hesitantly, the others following her reluctantly. With each step, the void seemed to close in, the oppressive air thick with the stench of despair. Suddenly, a flicker in the distance caught Emily's eye. She squinted, heart pounding. Was it a light? Or an illusion? As they grew closer, the light expanded, coalescing into a swirling mist that danced wildly. Is that? Chris began, but the mist thickened, and a familiar figure emerged from its depths. Jake stood there, a ghostly image barely held together, eyes wide with fear. Emily! Help me! He shouted, but his voice echoed distorted, like a scream swallowed by the darkness, fading into oblivion. Jake! She lunged forward, but a pulse of energy radiated from the locket, throwing her back into Chris and Sarah. The glow flickered harder, desperately fighting against the encroaching shadows. Don't let go! Sarah screamed. There was urgency in her voice that surged through Emily, knitting their desperate hopes together. Jake! Hold on! Emily cried, pushing the locket toward him. We're coming! Just hold on! But the shadows reacted violently, swirling with fierce intensity. Emily's heart raced as an unearthly roar erupted, rattling her bones. It was angry, furious at their defiance. Stay together! Chris shouted, gripping her hand tightly while Sarah took the opposite one. Emily felt the locket vibrating, almost matching the frantic beats of her heart, sensing the collective fear binding them. Together, she projected their hopes into the charm. Not today! Not while we're together! The shadows writhed, a dark river crashing against their resolve, as tendrils gripped at their ankles. There was no escape, only an agonizing fight against the unstoppable tide of despair. Jake's voice wavered, the light flickering around him dimming. He began to fade, retreating into the mist that swirled menacingly. No! Come back! In that moment, the world shifted again, and they felt themselves being dragged backward, away from Jake's fading figure, pulled into the yawning chasm of darkness. What is happening? Chris shouted while struggling against the force pulling them apart. Fight it! Emily urged, focusing on the light that seemed so far away. Through the chaos, she caught a fleeting glimpse of Jake's terrified expression, and it solidified her resolve. They had to move forward, no matter the cost. As the shadows clawed at them, the locket pulsed one last time, sending a shockwave of light that shattered the darkness briefly. For a split second, she saw Jake's face brightening before it all collapsed into night again. In that instant of illumination, hope collided with despair, and Emily realized the cost of failure was more than just their lives. It was everything they loved, everything that made them whole. The last thing she heard before they were consumed by darkness was Jake's voice, delicate yet piercing. Please don't leave me. What would they have to sacrifice to save him? Would they discover the truth hidden in the shadows or become part of the darkness forever? The darkness clung to them like a dense fog, suffocating in its malevolence. Emily stumbled, feeling the weight of despair coiling tighter around her as the shadows closed in. She could hear the whispers now, faint but insistent, their words a haunting melody of anguish and longing. Emily! Chris's voice snapped her back to the present, urgency lined with panic. We can't let this place take us. Right. Sarah squeezed Emily's hand, her grip like a vice. Emily could feel the trembling anxiety in her friend that mirrored her own. They couldn't afford to lose one another, not now. Emily summoned a frayed sense of courage, directed it toward the locket. Just stay focused. The light led us to him once. She steeled herself, searching the dark for any hint of direction. It can guide us again. But there was no light now. Only that dreadful sound, the groan of untold horrors echoing, reverberating through the void. Jake, she breathed softly, wincing at the sound of his name in the oppressive air. Could he still hear her? Did he know they were not far behind? She tried to latch on to the memory of him, the image of his smile, of their shared laughter, though it felt distant under the weight of despair. Just then, the shadows surged forward, almost alive in their pursuit. Emily felt her breath hitch as tendrils curled around her legs, a clammy grip that sent cold shivers racing up her spine. We have to move! Chris shouted, yanking her forward. They stumbled together, each step met with the disembodied wails filtering in from all sides. Look! Sarah cried, pointing into the dark. A flickering glow emerged through the haze, a shimmering light that threatened to dance just out of reach. Jake! Emily's heart surged. She darted toward it, but the shadows retaliated, slashing and whispering with anger. The air thickened, pressing against them like a living entity clawing for their souls. Emily, wait! It's a trap! Chris yelled, but her feet were already in motion, spurred by the flickering hope of reaching Jake. Her hand burned as she held the locket aloft, its energy beginning to pulse in time with her frantic heartbeat. Stay together! Echoed Sarah's voice, laced with fear as she grabbed Chris's arm tightly. The light grew brighter, beckoning. Emily was close now. She could see it was no longer just a flicker but a beacon, radiating warmth and safety. For a fleeting moment, she saw Jake clearly, his face illuminated, eyes pleading. You have to break through, Em. Please! Don't leave me! The shadows hissed, a grotesque mimic of Jake's voice, and with it, an icy dread coursed through Emily. The tendrils clung tighter, threatening to drag her into the darkness. In her mind's eye, she envisioned the world collapsing, friends lost, dreams shattered, and she couldn't accept it. Not when he needed her. Together. Emily shouted, her voice a rallying cry against the biting cold. She felt the locket surge, sending a radiant explosion of light that erupted through the darkness like fireworks. Seized by courage, she surged forward again, pulling Chris and Sarah with her. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as the brightness expanded, consuming everything, trying to drown out the creeping dread. Then, right before her eyes, the mist began to churn and twist. The distant echoes transformed, morphing into blurred screams that clawed at her ears. The light dimmed, flickering perilously. "Help! Help me, Emily!" Jake's voice, hoarse and desperate, came again from deep within the swirling abyss. It chilled her to the core, an embodiment of all her fears. They were close now, the light crackling against the encroaching darkness. But as Emily stretched her hand out toward Jake, a sudden darkness slammed back as the shadows lashed out, carrying him deeper into oblivion. "No!" she screamed, feeling the locket slip from her grasp, hurtling toward the ground in a cascade of swirling light. Everything flickered once more. A violent crash of energy resonated, splintering the void and dispersing the shadows, yet leaving a gaping hole where Jake had been. "What just happened?" Sarah's voice trembled, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did we lose him?" Chris whispered, gazing into the void where the light once shone. Emily felt cold horror wash over her. They had brushed too close to something unfathomably sinister. "No. We have to go back. We have to save him." As the darkness twisted around them, an unsettling laugh echoed through the void, chilling them to the bone. It was a voice they all recognized, dripping with malice. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" With that, the darkness shifted, closing around them, revealing the nightmare they thought they had escaped. What awaited them in that eerie expanse? What other truths lay hidden within the shadows? All they knew was that they had to face it together or risk losing everything once again. The shadows twisted like serpents, curling around Emily, Chris, and Sarah, their laughter morphing into a cacophony of sinister whispers. It felt like they were being pulled into a vortex, towards something dark and unyielding. Emily's heart raced, pounding against her ribs as the chilling grip of fear clasped around her throat. "Don't let go!" she managed to gasp, tightening her hold on Sarah's hand. Chris pulled them both closer, pressing against Emily as if they could form an unbreakable barrier against the gloom. What if it has him?" Sarah's voice quavered barely above a whisper, her eyes darting around for any sign of Jake. The panic was palpable, hanging thick in the air. But this was no time to give in. The memory of Jake's pleading face clawed at Emily's resolve. "We have to fight it, we have to get back." Her voice was shaky, but it cracked through the suffocating weight of despair. "The light. We need the light." The darkness shifted, roiling and thrashing, as if reacting to her words. An icy wind howled, sending a shiver down her spine. It felt as if they were surrounded by something alive, something hungry. "Emily! Look!" Chris screamed, pointing into the depths of the shadows. A faint flicker was mirroring the pulse of their hearts, an echo of the beacon they had chased before. "It's just an illusion!" Sarah cried, fear etching deep lines on her face as the laughter grew louder, a maniacal chorus growing closer. "We can't trust it." But something in Emily stirred at the sight. "No, it's real. Jake is in there. He has to be. Think about it," Chris shouted, forcing her to meet his eyes. "We can't, then we'll just keep moving." The defiance in Emily's voice was electric. She kicked forward, breaking free of the dark clutches, dragging her friends with her. The shadows shrieked in rage, clawing at them, desperate to reclaim their prisoners. As they advanced, the flickering light brightened, illuminating grotesque faces formed from the darkness. They melted into the shadows and recoiled, but the warmth of the glow ignited something within Emily. "We have to push through." Suddenly, shrieks echoed from behind them. "Turn back!" The foreboding warning sliced through the air, filled with longing. Shadows surged, almost human, grappling at them, pleading for release. Their faces contorted, twisted with despair. "Is Jake in there? Is he trapped?" Emily's voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in as she saw the longing in those faces. "Don't listen!" Chris shouted, his grip tightening around her wrist, but the eerie connection to the pained visages sent jagged shards of doubt slicing through Emily's mind. They were people once lost, scared, just like them. "No!" Sarah yelled, and Emily felt her friend tugging them back. "We can't get caught in that." But it was too late. The darkness surged, crashing against them like an unforgiving tide. Emily was swept into a swirling maelstrom of anguish and confusion. Please." Jake's voice erupted through the chaos, clearer than before. It lanced through her like a bolt of lightning, electrifying her fear. "You have to choose. Or we'll be lost forever." "What choice?" she screamed, her voice raw, heart racing. "What do you want from us?" His face appeared again, ephemeral, full of desperate love and undeniable pain. "You can't turn back, you must let go of the darkness. Fight for me, fight for us." The shadows screamed in protest, clawing at her heart and soul. She could feel them sinking their frigid fingers deeper, dragging her into an abyss, but Jake's voice burned against their cold touch. With her heart clenched and pulsing in her ears, she threw her arms forward, calling on every ounce of love and hope buried inside her. "I'm coming, Jake. I want to let go." The darkness recoiled, hissing. A wave of light erupted from her core, exploding outward. Shadows scattered, shrieking in agony as cracks of light filled the void. Emily clung to the warmth of Jake's voice, pushing against the tide of despair. But suddenly, the light flickered again. Emily's heart dropped when she noticed a new figure emerging. A silhouette. Formed, hauntingly familiar, glowing with an unsettling brightness. "Help us, help me," a voice called, twisting anguish and warmth into one. As the darkness shrank back, the face became clearer. It wasn't Jake. "Who are you?" Chris shouted, anxiety threading through his voice. "Trust me," it pleaded, and the shadows around them began to blend together, losing shape, losing control. Emily felt the air tighten with uncertainty. Time hung in suspense as the new figure reached out, threatening to pull them toward the light or into something far worse. Could they trust it? And who was really waiting on the other side of that radiant glow? "Stay close," she yelled, as the figures loomed closer, shadows dancing along the edges of their vision, waiting to claim their souls once again. What did the flickering light really conceal? And could they resist the embrace of the speakers of despair forever? The moment hung suspended in the twilight of reality and nightmare. Emily's heart hammered loudly, rhythmically, like a drum urging her to fight, pushing her toward the glow. The house trembled as if it sensed their resolve and wanted to latch onto their fear. The figure hovered near the flickering light, its essence palpable and inviting. "Jake needs you. Don't choose darkness," it urged, intensity burning in its voice. "Do we trust them?" Sarah whispered, fear bubbling in her eyes, anxiety coating her words. "They're clearly in distress, just like us," Chris growled. "But we have to focus on Jake." The urgency cut through the chaos as Emily fixed her gaze on the ethereal glow. "We can't back down now." She took a step forward, pulling Sarah and Chris along as shadows crawled at their heels, desperate not to lose their grip. With every inch closer to the figure, tendrils of darkness lashed out, whispering promises of despair, trying to weave their doubts around them. "Join us, just surrender, lose yourself," they begged, the dark voices laced with venom, slithering around Emily and burying deeper into her mind. "Don't listen!" she cried out, clenching the locket, the chill of its weight a reminder of everything at stake. "We have to keep moving." As they approached, the surface of the figure rippled with life, recognition and compassion surfacing in its features. "Emily!" it called, the voice resonating with a timbre that shook her core. "You need to stop resisting. You need to embrace the light, embrace hope." With a surge of adrenaline, Emily pushed forward, the embrace of the light growing warmer, almost tangible in the heavy air. Around them, shadows shrieked, recoiling from the glow as if burned by its warmth. "Jake!" she shouted, and the world blurred around her. She could feel him out there, lost and fighting. "I'll come for you. I swear!" Suddenly, the ground trembled more violently, and the walls of this twisted realm screamed in agony, collapsing around them. You think you can escape? The shadows hissed in unison, their voices a haunting echo. You will become part of us. No! Emily shouted defiantly, refusing to be pulled into the abyss. She willed the light from the locket to surge and pushed forward harder, dragging her friends with her. The figure extended its translucent hand, reaching for them. This way. Embrace the light, take my hand. With hesitation, determination, and every ounce of longing, Emily sprinted toward that shimmering light. Together! She shouted, white-knuckling Chris and Sarah, squeezing their hands tightly. They took a leap into the radiant unknown. The moment they contacted the light, the shadow screamed again, a horrifying wail reverberating through the air like a siren. Light erupted around them, prickling their skin with warmth. In an instant, the world shifted, and Emily felt them being pulled into a vortex of bright, blinding energy. Everything around became a cascade of vibrant colors, laughter echoing in the midst of chaotic bursts and sudden clarity. Then, as quickly as it began, the light faded. Emily found herself standing amidst her friends under a brilliant moonlit sky. The oppressive heaviness of the darkness lifted. The old Wilkins house stood behind them, now just a dilapidated structure beneath the peaceful glint of stars, no longer looming or threatening. But something was missing. Jake! She called, her voice echoing through the quiet night. Panic flared inside her as she turned to Chris and Sarah, their expressions mirroring her fear. Where is he? Sarah clenched her fists, searching the shadows. He was right here. We have to go back. Emily's heart tore in her chest. We have to find him. No! Chris shouted, grabbing her arm with urgency. We can't. We barely escaped. The house, it could still be hungry, waiting to reclaim its victims. His voice was edged with terror that hummed between them. But Emily couldn't bear the thought. We need to try, she pleaded, desperation clawing at her throat. Suddenly, a shimmer of light flickered at the doorstep of the Wilkins house. Emily's heart leaped. Look! They turned, hope igniting stronger than fear. The light pulsed like a heartbeat, and against the backdrop of the old house, a familiar figure emerged. Jake! Emily screamed, tears of joy flooding her eyes. He stepped forward, barely able to hold his form together, but there he was, a beacon of resolve, a reminder of everything worth fighting for. Emily, please, it's been so dark. I thought before he could finish, she rushed into his arms, holding on like she'd never let go. You're here. You're home. We're safe. I miss you so much, he whispered hoarsely, visibly trembling. Let us get out of here. Chris shouted, urgency in his voice, snapping them back to reality. Watching the weight of the old house behind them, they turned together, bodies tight with the bonds of camaraderie. Despite the scars, both visible and hidden, they knew they were no longer alone. As they stepped away, a final whisper echoed from within the house, a distorted taunt. You can never truly escape. The shadows linger, always waiting. They walked away into the light, building their new reality together, armed with the knowledge of their resilience. Whatever lingered, whatever darkness threatened, they stood united and unbroken, ready for whatever may come next. The haunting echoes of that night would fade, but the bonds forged in darkness would always shine brightest. They had faced fear together. They had vanquished the shadows. And they would always find their way home, no matter how deep the darkness. Don't let this be the end. Subscribe immediately to our channel and follow our adventures through the dark corners of stories yet untold. Smash that like button now to keep the stories alive and help us climb the algorithm. Flood the comments with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about what happens next. And share this journey with at least 5 friends who need to experience these spine-chilling tales along with you. Only true fans will show their support through these actions. Let your voice be heard.